of Hosni Mubarak. Now, though, the Egyptian army is the target of public hatred once again. This is what's happening in Tahrir Square. You'll remember that name, in Cairo right now. And there has been violence all over the weekend. At least 35 people have died. Hundreds more have been injured. 3 days of clashes here in Cairo and across the country between protesters and security forces. Well, why? Well, people say that they're scared they're losing the fruits of that hard-fought revolution to the marshals and generals who are determined to cling on to power. Take a listen.
Our position is that no change has happened in the country at all. 9 months have passed. The military council said that after 6 months they would hand over power. 9 months have passed and there is no indication at all that they are handing over power.
The military council is just a clone of Hosni Mubarak. They're pushing the same program with the same idiocy and the same sense of inertia.
We need revolutionary tribunals, a revolutionary government and a strong revolutionary man chosen by the people to lead the country during this sensitive time.
Well, that's the view from the street. Well, we've heard from the army as well. A spokesperson addressed a press conference earlier today, and he blamed the violence on thugs. The army says that elections will still go ahead next week as planned, but 9 months after the revolution, the army is still very much calling the shots. So will Egyptians ever see their dream of democracy realised? Well, joining me tonight to discuss is Myra Mahdi. She's an Egyptian author and researcher. Also here with us in the studio is Hall Gardner. He's a professor of international politics at the American University here in Paris. In Cairo tonight, Alfred Raouf is an Egyptian activist. He joins us on the line. We'll have more guests for you later in the programme. But let's start with you, Alfred. I understand you're planning a million-man march for tomorrow. There's a big risk, though, that it could turn violent, as we've seen over the past few days.
Yes, we are planning that, actually. And we have called for this today. A few of the, not a few, actually, several political movements have met this morning and decided to call for this million march tomorrow at 4 p.m., which means this is after work. This is usually when people can join the demonstrations. The violence is still ongoing at this moment, and there are lots of injuries. And I think if the number is high enough, might be possible that the police will cease fire and just get back to their Ministry of Interior borders.
Now, the last time there were demonstrations like this, of course, there was one demand, a very clear and loud demand from the people, and that was Mubarak out. He's now gone. What are you calling for this time?
This time there is only one demand. What we have seen in the last 9 months is that the Supreme Council of Armed Forces has terribly failed in managing the situation and the transitional period. They are simply the old regime, as far as we can see. There has been lots of people detained from the activists and are in front of military trials. About 12,000 people have been military trialed. We have seen on the 9th of October the military killing civilians in front of the Maspero building. They have failed one time after the other. And for now, we are calling for the stepping down of the Supreme Council of Armed Forces politically, meaning we want a civil government that represents the revolution and that will have absolute power to take any decisions that they see fit. Mainly and namely, we're talking about two main points. The first point is the security, which means they will work very swiftly on restructuring the Ministry of Interior. And this will help definitely the economy, which is the second thing that they will be working on.
All right, OK. Hall Gardner, those fears then from the activists, from people in Cairo, people in Egypt, worried that they're losing the fruits of this revolution. Is part of the problem that the army has been quite vague about when it will implement this transition to a civilian democracy?
Well, I think the dominant idea at the time was that didn't want Tahrir Square to become Tenement Square, so that there was great pressure on the Egyptian military at the time not to crack down. Now, what there was at that time, I was in China during that crackdown. And the Chinese had a third option, which was time will tell. Wait out just let's wait and see and let things pass. And I think that's what stall for time. And I think that's what the Egyptian military chose. They listened, or they gave lip service to the Americans who told them not to crack down. And now they're they're really in a rough position here, because they're trying to hold on to their status. They're trying to hold on to the economic advantages that they've held. I mean, Egypt's been a military state for so long. We can go back to Nasser, and therefore, I think on the one hand they do want to move things forward, but move things forward in their advantage. So they will try to begin to negotiate with the separate political parties, keep the sort of divide and rule, make some plastic reforms here and there that suit their interests. But the more pressure, the longer they wait, I think the more the situation will get worse.
All right, Myra Mahdi, do you think the army are playing for time, that they want to hang on to power, that they're trying to secure their interests ahead of anything else?
Well, they didn't hide themselves from doing that, because they said that they wanted legislative elections, Majlis Shura, and then reform the constitution, and last of all, a presidency. And they did say that they will only leave power once the president is there, which puts us to 2013. So, I mean, they didn't hide their intention lately of staying. Therefore, it is completely to the opposite of what they had said at the beginning, which is maximum 6 months. And this is why the revolutionary youth is absolutely aghast at that. Incredible to mock at them to that degree. I mean, it's a mockery. It's a mockery.
All right, Alfred, let's go back to you in Cairo. Let's call them the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. Let's call them SCAF. Some might say that they have a very important role at the moment, because we are in a very volatile situation and they must maintain security ahead of anything else. And the truth is that at the moment there is no alternative to their rule.
Well, this is definitely a critical situation that we're having at hand. On one hand, we have the Supreme Council, the SCAF, who represent the old regime, are still trying to cling on to power, and they have failed again in maintaining security. So if the main goal for SCAF is to maintain security, they have not been doing their job. What they have been focusing on is trying to secure their power over the next parliament and the next government, and even they tried to push that into the new constitution. So I realize there's a difficulty here, and that's why we're not calling for SCAF to completely step down at this very moment. We are rather asking to hand in their political power into a salvation government, a government that is formed from the various political parties. They should overlook the next elections. They should overlook the writing of the new constitution.
So the council of 100 civilians who are currently in charge of making decisions, you say that they are the wrong people. They shouldn't be there. There should be another set of people doing that.
Definitely so. And at the same time, I would not say that the SCAF should completely step down. They still should take care of their main job, which is the army and the security.
Okay.
But at the same time, they shouldn't be overlooking what's going to happen in the political arena.
Okay, all right.
Try to have any, yeah.
All right, Alfred, stay with us for now. We're going to go to another part of Cairo now, though, because Heba Fatma Moraef is with us. She's from Human Rights Watch, joining us from Cairo now. Heba, the SCAF seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place at the moment. If they go ahead with the elections next week, there could be widespread violence. If they delay, there could be even worse violence. It seems they're in an extremely difficult position right now.
Yes, very much so. And I think, this is a crisis in a sense of the SCAF's own making. This started off as a small, peaceful protest. And I think its use of violence over the last 3 days has really escalated it to a situation where now political parties are being put in a position where they have to come out and condemn the violence. They've expressed some support, although not necessarily full participation. And in a sense, this is the worst possible timing for the SCAF, just on the eve of elections, which they've promised will be fair and free, and which they really were using as evidence of the first step towards a democratic transition. They haven't really focused on other issues related to the transition, which is why there is this level of anger and impatience in the square today. And I think the basic lesson that the square is sending to the SCAF is that it's not enough to rely on poll ratings, on popularity ratings of 80% approval from the general Egyptian public, that you do actually have to listen to protesters, to the activists out there. You can't just arrest them, you can't just use excessive force to disperse their protests. And you can't discredit them through state media, through accusations of being foreign agents. You have to address them. They're part of political space.
But as I just have been speaking to one of those activists that you mentioned, he says there is a role for the SCAF, but that there needs to be more political input as well. But the problem is, isn't it, that Egypt has been a dictatorship for several decades. The political class is very underdeveloped.
Well, yes, obviously. I mean, the SCAF is a continuation of the 1952 military regime, and I think most of the young activists who participated in the January protests did not envision at nowadays, when Mubarak stepped down, that what had in fact occurred was partially a soft military coup, and that we'd see a continuation and a lack of change in decision-making policies by the military. I think the lack of development of the political opposition is obviously a result of the fact that Mubarak did not allow political parties to be formed, did not allow for independent association. And what that's meant is that a lot of infighting, a lack of consensus-building measures over the past months has given the military a fairly easy hand. For months and months, Islamists and liberal political parties were disagreeing over whether elections should come first or the constitutional should come first. And that lack of civilian consensus has played into the military's hand to a certain extent. However, despite all of that, one of the demands that's been consistent throughout and that is being made most strongly at this point is the desire among all new political parties for civilians to have a say in Egypt's transition and in the process moving forward. And over the past months, we've seen a monopolization of decision-making power in the hands of the military, a decrease in the powers to the caretaker government, and now finally, which is what has caused this final crisis, an attempt by the military to limit the powers of the newly elected parliament going forward. So in a sense, this crisis is a reflection of the political mismanagement of the transition and a natural part of the process.
But it is uncharted territory, isn't it, what we're talking about here? But do you think the delay between Mubarak's ousting and elections next week has been too long, and that is part of the problem here?
Well, it is true that I don't think the opposition has formed a really coherent platform in order to change. We've got high unemployment, tourism isn't coming back, Egypt's the interesting thing is the military has been denying Western aid but getting investment from the Arab world, which is shaking up the Europeans and the Americans. But I want to go back to one point, is that figure of 12,000 civilians, military tribunal is more than Mubarak's 3 decades, if the figure is correct. Now, that means that this is what's causing the rage of the people. The military have to come back and start allowing some political space. Now they've mentioned the Turkish model in which the military can intervene, but the Turkish generals stay out of things and they're only supposed to come in at the last minute when there's a real disaster. But we're seeing the Egyptian military creep in and come back to the forefront. And I think that's why the situation is going to get out of hand if they don't really move forward on this process as they've promised, and even if it might take to 2013 more than they originally promised, they have to move forward and make concrete steps to show that they're going to set up a constitution, that they are entering a dialogue with the different groups, and that includes the Muslim Brotherhood and the liberal factions as well. By the way, the liberal factions feel getting squeezed out between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military. So, I mean, there's a lot of, it is uncharted ground, but that's just what a revolution's all about, and that's why they, look at the French one, it goes through different kinds of phases, and they can be very, very frightening in different
Well,
different
quite, have people been a bit over-enthusiastic, perhaps, about Egypt switching so quickly to becoming a democracy? These things, I mean, you mentioned the French Revolution, it takes years and years and years, it takes decades to achieve something like that.
In a situation like that, when things happened from a day to the next, nobody could expect what happened with Mubarak's ouster, and people were so happy with what happened that they just slowed the pace. Now, what we have heard over the past few months is, where are the activists? Where is the youth of Tahrir? Here they are. Today we see that they were not asleep. They woke up. So to me, it's a positive move. The only thing that I see as a very, very negative move is the violence. I mean, we haven't learned anything. The SCAF hasn't learned anything. Violence is not going to resolve the problem. It'll bring more people to Tahrir.
Do you think that they might have been a little frightened, though, given what happened in January and February, how quickly things escalated? These protests were much, much smaller than what happened back then.
Exactly.
Do you think they overreacted because they were scared, perhaps, that would spread out so quickly?
No, I think they are completely lost because it's not their job to manage a country. It's not their job. Their job is to defend the country against an enemy. Their job is to stay on the borders. Their job is really being a military man, not managing a country. Anybody who knows how to manage a country would have said, give the people a little bit more leeway so that they feel they have achieved something. What people feel today, what I feel today, is that we haven't achieved much. We just changed the image of a president by another image in the offices, and that's what we've done.
Alfred Raouf, what would you say to that? Maira Mahdi accusing you and other activists of being asleep over the past 8 months.
Not exactly, come on.
Saying that you, not of being asleep, but of not getting involved enough in the political process over the past 8 months.
I think there's somebody else on the line. I couldn't hear exactly the question. I'm sorry.
I was just putting to you Maira Mahdi's point that the activists, people like you, haven't been as visible as perhaps they might have been over the past 8 months, and that's why we've got the situation we've got now.
Well, we definitely have not been idle. The fact is we've been working so hard, but again, it's a huge and massive media machine that SCAF controls. So every time we started asking for any of the rights, the media continuously was against us, and that's why we couldn't get the people around us anymore for a long time. Few times they gathered around us, but several times they did not show up in Tahrir. At this point, it's actually the people that were ahead of us. They were ahead of us. And they went to Tahrir Square against the brutality of the police again. And again, violence brought people back to Tahrir. What we're trying to do, and you have to realize that most of the activists in the show now have not really practiced politics before. Very few of them did. And we're still learning a lot.
Absolutely, everyone still learning. Yeah, Alfred, I'm sorry to cut you off. Exactly. We're gonna have to stop there because we have to take a short break. When we come back, though, I will get you to finish that point. We'll have the international headlines for you as well. Don't go away.
Watch all of France 24 on France24.com. It now features more content and is quicker and easier to use. 24 hours a day, wherever you are, visit our website and catch up on all the latest news. Watch the channel in high definition. Pause live TV and watch programs from the past 24 hours at the click of a button. Find our reports, programs and web documentaries in seconds. All of France 24 in French, English and Arabic on France24.com.